heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
I'm Caroline Hyde at Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Coming up, the EU gives Microsoft the green light for its $69 billion takeover of Activision Blizzard. We'll discuss what this actually means for the gaming industry's biggest ever deal.
And we'll talk Twitter as Linda Yaccarino prepares to take the helm at the social media company. How will her experience help lure advertisers back to the platform?
Plus, we'll talk all things artificial intelligence. We sit down with the CEO of C3.ai as results beat, and we get the startup AI perspective from the venture firm Insight Partners. All that and so much more coming up. Before we go into the startups, let's go into the big caps. Let's go into what's happening in the public markets. Ed, interestingly, I'm stealing your thunder. Let's take it back to what's actually more broadly my focus, which is the NASDAQ, which is actually up about 0.5 percentage point. It's outperforming the rest of the industries on the day. We're outperforming the rest of the benchmarks, even though we're basically a little bit cautious. Volumes are lower. We're worried about, of course, the debt ceiling. We're worried about some of that New York data that came in terms of manufacturing, looking lackluster. And basically, we're a little bit more cautious on our outlook. But we are seeing big tech being bought just tentatively on those thinner volumes, up 0.5%. The 10-year yield pushes higher as we hear from some Fed speakers, Raphael Bostic being one of them, who sits down with Mike McKelvey a little bit later. But he's talking about, look, no, I'm pushing back against your viewpoint that we're going to be cutting rates here in the US anytime soon. Interesting moves over in Turkey. Could we see political upheaval? In fact, we have a down day overall for assets over there, and the dollar strengthens versus the Turkish lira. Moving on, let's look at what's happening in terms of crypto, in terms of Bitcoin. And actually, as dollar actually weakens on the day just a little bit, Ed, we are seeing Bitcoin just getting a bit of a bid, but we're still only at 27,000, so still not managing to push through that $30,000 level. But get into where I almost took our view a little moment ago.
Yeah, we woke up to a quiet Monday, right, Caro, this morning, worried about news, but we have had some that's moving markets. Meta now up 2.4%. Loop Capital upgrading that stock from a hold to a buy. We'll bring you those details later in the program, along with C3.ai up 18%. Early release of results, upgrading modestly its full year forecast for sales. We're going to speak to the CEO about what's really happening, all the investor interest around AI-related names. Tesla actually now flat. Elon Musk has been in France where he met with President Macron, but there was some feel good in that stock, of course, when we got details of a new Twitter CEO on Friday. The idea being that Elon Musk now will be more focused on Tesla, less distracted at Twitter, but we're giving back some of those gains off by around 0.1%, basically flat. The big story this Monday is that the European Union, through the European Commission, has approved Microsoft's deal to buy Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. We're going to get into the details over the analysis and reasoning, what it means for the cloud gaming market in particular. But you see the share reaction. It was modest at first. We're up a percentage point, highest level in 3 weeks on Activision. More modest, up just 0.2% on Microsoft. Separately, completely separately, Bloomberg reporting that Microsoft's cloud unit, Azure, is the subject of scrutiny from EU antitrust regulators, according to sources. We'll get those details later in the programme. A lot now going on.
They've been busy, haven't they? All this focus on competition and pushing back against it. Let's talk about it all. We've got our senior litigation analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, Jennifer Rye. We've also got Anna London, our legal reporter, Catherine Gamel. Catherine, starting with you, was it a surprise to see the EU sort of take a different stance from the UK?
Hi there. No, so this wasn't a surprise decision. We were anticipating that the European Commission would accept this deal with behavioural remedies. These behavioural remedies include vows to let rivals have access to the games for around 10 years. And the Commission said that with these conditions, that will allow the deal to be pro-competitive.
Jen, I'm going to come to you at Bloomberg Intelligence. In the analysis published by the European Commission, Jen, they say that actually this is going to be pro-growth, pro-market. How is their analysis so different to that of the UK CMA? Are they just reading two different sets of data?
You know, it's really just about a different prediction as to what's going to happen with cloud gaming in the future. And, you know, I think it just shows how difficult these merger decisions can be when they're involving tech and when they're involving future markets, because it's really, they're looking at a crystal ball and they're speculating about what can happen, and reasonable minds can differ. The European Commission views Microsoft's move to guarantee that these games, Call of Duty and World of Warcraft, that it would be acquiring from Activision, would be on these other cloud services, also in other cloud subscriptions. And that's not the way things are today. Those games aren't available. So the European Commission is looking at this as output expanding or pro-competitive. Whereas the UK is saying, no, we think Microsoft today has too much power in the cloud. And by having these great games, this must-have content for some gamers, in the future, they'll be able to push out these other cloud gaming services and these other competitors. And we're trying to prevent that. We're trying to prevent Microsoft from being dominant in this market in the future. So they just sort of saw what was going to happen in the future differently.
Catherine, we knew this was coming, at least the timing of the decision now through the 22nd. We got it. Bloomberg sources had said that the EU would rule in favour of the deal. So what happens now? What is the process that we're tracking at Bloomberg News?
Yes, so this decision has given a glimmer of hope to Microsoft, but it's not going to change things massively. Microsoft already face massive challenges in the US with the FTC having blocked to sue. And in the UK, the Microsoft will have to lodge its appeal at the Competition Appeal Tribunal by the end of the month. And that'll be really difficult because at the CAT, it is a judicial review process. So, they'll just look at the legality of the CMA's decision rather than really assessing the merits of that choice.
And what is interesting, Jen, is that, well, we just heard it from Catherine, a glimmer of hope coming, but realistically, this is an uphill battle, even though we do see a share price reaction for Activision Blizzard. Ultimately, from your analysis, it feels like you don't think the tune is being changed here. And what sort of timeline do you think this deal ultimately unwinding in your perspective, at least?
See this changing things very much, because at the end of the day, there's a very high standard to overturn a CMA decision. I actually did a little research and I looked at merger decisions by the CMA that had actually been reversed or sent back to the CMA on appeal, and it was about 30%. So, that's a low percentage. So it's a high standard. It's going to be difficult. And the European Commission's decision is separate and based on a separate analysis and maybe even different market conditions. So I don't really think it factors in much, and it doesn't change the fact that Microsoft has this very high, difficult standard to meet to overturn that decision. And then timing, you mentioned timing. I think that's so important here, because even if Microsoft is successful, let's say on appeal in the UK, and even with their lawsuit that's coming up in August in the US against the Federal Trade Commission, you're looking at a very, very long time period before there could be an actual ultimate final outcome. Because the CMA, let's say the appeal tribunal, doesn't like the decision or thinks the facts need to be reevaluated, they'll send it back to the CMA to look at it again. And in the US, even if the administrative law judge that will be hearing this trial rules for Microsoft, the FTC can appeal, and the appeal will go back to the commissioners, the very 3 commissioners that voted to sue to begin with. So there's a good chance that would be reversed, at which point Microsoft and Activision could appeal to a federal court. But we're talking way into the end of 2024 here, so a long time frame if they really want to have success.
Jen, Catherine, Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision, has sent through an emailed statement to us, and he says that the EC conducted an extremely thorough, deliberate process. But the bit that jumps out at me is, although they required stringent remedies, and I think that's a reference to the 10 years of access to cloud platforms on Call of Duty. Catherine, remind us, when they go back to the CMA and make this appeal in the UK, they're not necessarily appealing the decision in and of itself. They're appealing how that decision was made. They're appealing the process. Remind us what has to happen.
Yes, exactly that. So at the CAT, they don't look at the merits of the decision. They just look at it in a judicial review process, in which will be the legality of the decision. So, they can look at things whether the CMA was irrational or, if there was any procedural errors there that they might have got wrong. I mean, I think it's also important to understand with this process that if the CAT does find that there were any errors made, that the CAT will then actually refer that back to the CMA itself. So that is another hurdle for Microsoft that it will need to pass.
Yes. We should point out that the UK CMA did come out with a response this morning saying they stand by their original decision. So we'll wait and see what happens. Bloomberg's Catherine Gemmell and Jennifer Rhee of Bloomberg Intelligence, thank you very much. Sticking with Microsoft and antitrust, we mentioned it a bit earlier. Microsoft's Azure cloud business has been targeted by the European Union's antitrust arm amid concerns the US software firm is leveraging its market power to squeeze out rivals. As part of an informal probe, regulators are quizzing competitors and customers about how Microsoft may be using its access to business-sensitive information belonging to cloud firms it has commercial dealings with. That all according to sources. Caro.
Competition analysts, they're busy. So too is one Linda Yaccarino. We know that she's saying she's excited to transform Twitter, Ed. We're going to be talking about what she brings to the social media platform and more with 3PAS Studios' Stephen Wolf Pereira joining the show. And sticking with social, just check out what's happening with Meta shares. You pointed them a little bit earlier, but Loop Capital upgrading the social media giant's stock to a buy from a hold, saying that the company's revenue picture looks increasingly positive. The analyst price target is actually all the way up at $320, so quite a way to go from the 238 we currently see. From New York, from San Francisco, this is Bloomberg. So Twitter's incoming CEO, Linda Yaccarino, says she's excited to transform the company and achieve Elon Musk's vision for the platform. In her first few tweets since getting the job, Yaccarino said, look, she's committed to the development of the social media company and said feedback from users is vital to that future. Let's speak to someone who knows her impact, known her for 15 years at least. 3PAS Studios' Chief Business Officer, Stephen Wolf Pereira, is in the studio with us. And when you heard that this force that you've worked and seen and interacted with for 15 years is going to be taking the helm, what did you immediately think?
I thought it was a brilliant move. The platform needs a radical transformation. They need to have credibility with the marketplace, with brands, with consumers. And Linda has a track record around innovation, really putting consumers first. So I think it was a brilliant move for a platform that desperately needed change.
And is it safety first? Is it innovation first? How does she manage to square that circle of a CTO who's going to want to be pushing ahead with innovation and perhaps running fast and breaking things?
Look, on the technology side, I mean, obviously Elon's a visionary, and he'll be able to certainly figure out the path from Twitter to transform it to the super app X. But you need to stabilize the business. I mean, right now, it's been bleeding advertisers. No one wants to be on the platform. There's been all of this drama around it. And Linda is a stabilizing force. I mean, she spent over 10 years at NBC Universal, really stabilizing that company, growing it to over $13 billion in sales, leading their upfront, leading, kind of innovation with data, with other TV networks, really trying to bring the community together. And she is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, there's a reason why they have her nickname being the Velvet Hammer, because she's able to negotiate with brands. She's tough, she's fair, but order, number one is really to bring brands back onto the platform.
And to do that alongside an executive chair, of course, Ed. And I mean, you know a lot about the people that worked alongside Elon over the years.
Yeah, it's interesting how it works. So at SpaceX, you have Gwynne Shotwell as the COO and president running things day to day. At Tesla, particularly in recent quarters, Zach Kirkhorn, the CFO, is like more visible, and other executives like literally appearing on stage. So I guess, Stephen, to your mind, how do you see that working? Linda, who you know, with Elon Musk day to day, do you think that she can get him to see reason or compromise?
I think so. I mean, we saw a trial run of what their relationship is going to look like about a month ago. In Miami, there was the Possible Conference, a big marketing event, and she was on stage doing a fireside chat interview with Elon. And she didn't pull any punches. I mean, Linda's not a wallflower, right? I mean, she's very tough. She knows her business. She is a good New Yorker, grew up in Long Island, Italian heritage. I mean, she's as tough as they come. And she asked him the tough questions on stage. And so you could see that she didn't shy away from asking him about, hey, why did Twitter cancel the client council that they had? Are you going to bring that back? Are you going to stop doing tweets at 3 a.m? That's not good for the platform. So I feel that she knows this space, she knows this industry, and she's beloved by brands and marketers and media agencies. And so if he's smart, he'll really give her the reins, let her be the CEO, let her build this platform, and then bring all the innovation to really help connect content, commerce, and community.
We go back to it. How does she build this platform? Elon sets out his ideas as CTO. Many of them we know about: subscription-based service, algorithmically addressing where things appear in the timeline. then what impact's Linda going to have when she comes in? What ideas can she actually install?
Well, first, it's about leadership. I mean, the company has, lost so many employees. They've obviously let a ton of people go. You know, they're a fraction of what they were before. I feel like there has been this crisis in confidence in Twitter, and here is a real leader who's going to come in and stabilize the business and bring back that confidence, bring back the trust of not just the employees, but also the advertising community. And you have to start there. I mean, at the end of the day, this has to be about getting the basics right. And she knows how to build a business. She is a leader. She is inspiring. She will bring talent to the company. I mean, she built a data business from scratch for NBCU. She understands e-commerce. She understands analytics. And so she had that full span of control on the business side. Again, you have incredible engineers and technologists over at Twitter, certainly at the helm with Elon. But, you know, having her really lead the business side, that's what this company needs.
It's interesting, of course, talking about the data lead, talking about ultimately how you show brands that you're making impact, the right impact for them, converting into sales. But I'm also interested in the grander vision. Many people had to quickly Google or search or ChatGPT who Linda Yaccarino is.
Right.
But behind the scenes, she's has had a very powerful influence, had a very influential job. What vision do you think she thinks Twitter ultimately is going to be to make this a worth her while kind of move?
Yeah, I mean, look, she was the chairwoman of NBC Universal's ad sales business, right? She had a great job. She was one of the most powerful people in media. So for her to leave, it had to be something really compelling. It had to be a bigger vision. And I think Elon shared the vision for the super app, for X. And I feel that she got really excited about that. And so, again, her ability to innovate, to bring consumers and brands along on this journey, that's a very unique position to be in. She understands content. She actually was a partner for Twitter for years. Think about the Olympics and the Super Bowl and World Cup. I mean, all those mega events that truly have global ramifications. She was at the center of that. So now to bring that lens around, again, content, commerce, and community, everyone is trying to connect that. And as one of the largest media brands on the planet, she understood that an audience, whether it's 18 to 34, 18 to 49, whatever advertisers are looking for, they could find that audience anywhere. The reality is you have to make it compelling to put those dollars on Twitter.
Yeah, we reported that there were others involved in that relationship, NBC and Twitter, and she was at a macro level. But that's great insight. 3PAR Studios Chief Business Officer Stephen Wolf-Pereira, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ed.
Now, coming up, Miguel McKelvey joins to talk about his recent moves, which include his acquisition of clothing brand American Giant and a social network for senior-aged users. More on that next. This is Bloomberg. In an effort to revitalize manufacturing in the US, Miguel McKelvey, co-founder of WeWork, says he's buying clothing brand American Giant. There's also plans to build a new social network for users 55 and older. Miguel McKelvey joins us now for more on what's quite a few announcements. I find manufacturing fascinating. Think about the world of technology on this show we operate in, and actually, that's a big part of the story. Why do you want to revitalize US manufacturing?
Well, it started for me with really, the same kind of response that I had to office workers with WeWork, is that the environment that people are working in just isn't great and isn't a nice place to be. Like sitting in a cubicle for 10 hours a day, to me, seemed terrible. And similarly, I think that the working environments where people make things have really been brought down to the lowest possible, from a design, from a ergonomic, from just a human perspective. And it makes sense because, you have to compete with really low labor in other places in the world. But I think in the US for our future, we can create jobs and places to work that are much better. And I think that's what can unlock, a new future for American manufacturing.
Miguel, across all of your projects, was it difficult to engage with investors? Did you have to do some reputational rebuilding or explain what happened at WeWork, your associations with Adam? Are those fair questions?
Yeah, I think they're fair. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I worked on was the WeWork product, and obviously helping to build an organization that scaled to, hundreds of locations around the world. And that is a credibility which I think is lasting. I mean, we were able to do amazing things. And then there's obviously another layer of things at the company that didn't go as well. And, people always have questions about that. And oftentimes I would say, people want to know the WeWork story. There's a sort of insatiable desire to learn more about what happened at WeWork. So I don't mind those conversations. For me, it's still a learning process. I still like reflecting on those times because I learned from all those conversations. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say reputational as much as just people are really curious.
People are curious also, of course, that you're getting back into the world of commercial real estate in many ways. We're thinking of, is it Naya, how you say it, a focus on a social network, but an in real life one for people 55 years and older? I can see the relevancy of this with older parents who complain about noise levels and the way in which one interacts. But ultimately, does the real estate arc that we're currently on at the moment mean that you're getting good prices? People are worried about the banks, for example, and their exposure to real estate, particularly commercial real estate.
Yeah, so there's a parallel to, WeWork when we first started. We were coming out of that financial crisis back, 2007, 2008, and then there was a big dip in commercial real estate back then, and that actually helped us acquire, especially in the early days, good deals on our initial buildings. And so I think that opportunity is similar. A lot of people were coming to me with, future of work questions. What do you think is going to happen? What role do you want to play in it? And honestly, I have to say I'm a bit not bored, but I've sort of been there, done that. And for me to re-enter that market didn't make sense to me. But I do think there are a lot of parallels. I mean, I want to create communities for people where they, enter and spend time in spaces that make them feel good. And I think that's where this opportunity became clear, an intersection of what I love to do and the opportunity in real estate.
Briefly, Adam Newman, of course, your co-founder of WeWork, is also back in the real estate game. Would you ever work with him again?
For me, my main thing is growth and learning. I like to keep expanding on, the experiences that life can offer me. And, Adam is a CEO. He's a top dog and a leader. And for me, I want to learn how to be in that position. I want to lead a company. And so it doesn't make sense right now for us to work together. But for no reason other than I just want to keep growing on my own journey.
Miguel, thanks for telling us your journey. American Giant, Proto, Naya, come on and talk to us about it again. Miguel McKelvey, co-founder of WeWork. From New York and San Francisco, this is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. Caroline, let's get a check on markets. We're in quite a tight range when it comes to equity markets. Look at the NASDAQ 100, up 0.3%. A lot of focus on what's happening with the debt ceiling debate out in D.C. A little bit of caution, although outperformance in semiconductors. I look at the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. Every name in the green apart from one, which is ASML, currently flat. A lot of upside there. Yields climbing a little higher, 4 basis points on the 10-year, 3.5%. And as you noted earlier, Bitcoin on its way back up again towards or and above $27,500 per token. In terms of the specific names and movers that we're watching, the big news flow mover is obviously Activision and Microsoft. Those two names moving to the upside. Microsoft basically flat now, but Activision up 1.3% after the European Commission approved the deal for Microsoft to acquire the video game maker for $69 billion. Looking at C3 AI, up 19%, Caro. Biggest jump since the end of March. Out early with results, slightly raising full-year guidance, but also some response from the company to short seller reports that we'll get into. With the C3 AI CEO, Tom Siebel, joins us now. Tom, you modestly raised guidance for the full year. Caroline's been doing a great job covering how a lot of the equity market activity at the start of this year is all AI driven. Was your guidance raise just the euphoria that we've seen in AI?
Hi, Ed. Hi, Caroline. We with all the planning activity that's going on after the end of the year for fiscal year 24 and 25 for new products, new customers, new growth, and now this is going on all over the world. we had a lot of good news to report, and we wanted to make sure that there wasn't an inadvertent selective disclosure of this information. So we issued this release just to make sure that the information was provided to the market in a manner that's compliant with all SEC regulations.
Thomas, it's fascinating. C3 generative AI for enterprise search. I think it was March that you unveiled this. You've said at the moment that the addressable market for enterprise AI is extraordinarily large, but everyone's fighting for it. We just had, of course, Palantir saying they want to take the whole market for generative AI, and they're particularly active in some of the defense areas that you are. Can there be multiple players? How are you feeling about competition?
I think if we look at, so Caroline, as you know, for some years now, for over a decade, we've been talking about this emerging market for applying artificial intelligence to enterprises to improve their business operations. Now, I think as we power into 2023, the whole world has come around to seeing that this is a huge addressable market, and there's no corporation that doesn't want to take advantage of it. This looks like a larger than $500 $1 trillion addressable software market, growing very rapidly, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for many companies to be quite successful in this space after it's over. This is a big one.
And how are they using your particular offering? How are what you are building for these companies, we just saw a load of the names, proving different?
Well, we use AI to basically make all these enterprise applications that have been installed in the last 3 decades, ERP, CRM, manufacturing, supply chain, to make them predictive so that we can predict how many parts we need in each component of our supply chain so we can deliver products on time and in full. For the United States Air Force, we use it to predict device failure or system failure in weapon systems like aircraft so that they have increased availability, fraud detection, customer churn. So these are the most common applications of enterprise AI to business processes. And I think that there is no CEO in the world that is not now trying to figure out how this is not kind of number one on his or her list to try to figure out how to use these technologies to advance their market position.
Tom, on April 4th, Kerrisdale Capital, a known short seller, alleged serious accounting and disclosure issues with C3 AI. What is your latest response to that short seller report?
Well, you can see on our website that our audit committee conducted an independent investigation with independent outside counsel and independent accounting firm and determined that all of those allegations were complete bunk. And so that we published that this morning. It's been well reported that Kerrisdale is under investigation by the Department of Justice for doing this sort of thing to manipulate stock prices to their economic advantage. If this is true, it's highly unlawful. We expect to have the opportunity to cooperate with the Department of Justice on this activity, and hopefully the Department of Justice will do their job. And if they find that there's wrongdoing, hopefully these people will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Okay, Tom, thank you for the update on that. I went to our audience and I said, Tom Siebel's coming on the show. What do you want to know? One question that caught my eye, are there any government or public sector contracts that you have turned down for ethics reasons when it relates to AI?
Yes, there is a government, and I won't say which one, okay, that has asked.
Well, come on, you've got to say which one now, Tom. Which government?
That has asked us to use AI to a Western government, because that's all we do business with, that has asked us to use AI to identify extremists in the population. We think that we don't want to touch that. On a less controversial note, okay, we were asked some years ago to build an AI-enabled HR system for the Department of the Army. Okay, this would use AI to determine who to promote, who to assign. Now, we elected not to do that because what we're doing is propagating cultural bias. No matter what the question is, the answer will be white male went to West Point. And in 2020, in the 21st century, that answer is simply not going to fly. And so there are other companies in our business who would get a snap at that opportunity in a second, but we won't do those things.
Basically, you're saying you're self-regulating. Tom. And I'm interested in what you make of the guardrails, whether they're being put in place enough amid private markets. We just had the Credo AI CEO on recently, Navina, who's working along with Booz Allen. I know you do a lot of work with Booz Allen, thinking about how we can have these guardrails put in place by the companies themselves. Ultimately, do you think government needs to be ahead of the curve here? You have a lot of ex-government officials on your board, for example.
Caroline, I think you're raising a very important issue. I mean, this matter of the ethical application of AI is hugely important. I mean, these technologies are extraordinarily powerful, and pretty soon it will be almost virtually impossible for a mortal to determine the difference between news and fake news. These questions call into the question our ability to conduct free and open democratic societies. So this is very troubling stuff. I don't believe that in the long run that self-regulation is going to work. We've seen too many private enterprises and, by the way, too many public sector organizations that do not act beneficially. But, you know, it is an important issue, and it does need to be discussed, or this will go to some horrible places.
Tom, I wanted to come to you and ask about your costs. There's a lot of emphasis on particularly chip design, you know, finding the most efficient path forward to power cloud, the energy costs behind building large language models, training foundational models. How are you kind of making sure that in all the work you're doing, you said you're bringing new products in, that you're still not letting kind of costs unravel and get out of control?
Well, our costs, our cost in operating these large language models and these enterprise AI applications, and our customers' cost are primarily in from these vendors that provide the cloud infrastructure, from Google Cloud, from AWS, from Microsoft, Azure, what have you. Now, I think that, you know, these guys who operate these companies and those companies that are behind them, like NVIDIA, these are very smart people, and they are, I think, making amazing kind of breakthroughs in chip technology and energy efficiency technology. And I'm confident they will be able to provide these massive scale computational and storage infrastructures available to government and private enterprises at more than acceptable cost.
Tom, great to catch up with you. Thanks for coming on a busy day. Tom Siebel is C3AI CEO. Meanwhile, Bloomberg News is in touch with Kerrisdale about, of course, what Tom has said, if they want to make further comment. We appreciate your comments today. Meanwhile, sticking with AI, Google is adding 2 new features in its image search to reduce the spread of misinformation, especially now that the artificial intelligence tools have made the creation of photorealistic fakes all the more common. Now, the new feature is called About This Image. You're going to give context with it. You're going to understand when the image or similar ones were first indexed by Google, where they first appeared, and where else they've shown up online. Coming up, guess what we're talking? AI, yes, but this time from a venture perspective. How are you starting out your investment journey? Where are the startups that you want to be backing? George Matthew, Managing Director of Insight Partners with plenty of expertise in the field of AI and ML. Joining us next, this is Bloomberg.
I think the hype around AI is underhyped, given the impact I think it is going to have on the way we work and live.
The top of mind questions for many of our customers is, how can they continue innovating responsibly or get crushed by this generative AI wave?
I think it's going to take a while for regulatory frameworks to come into place, given the lack of knowledge, it appears, of people in Washington.
I really think it's going to be incumbent on companies themselves to be responsible in how they're taking advantage of this technology and putting in place those guardrails.
We train our models to actually understand what is the information on the web that corroborates it, that backs up the information. And if we can't corroborate it, then we will not output it.
And what we're seeing today is a lot of AI tourists pretending to be AI natives. There's a lot of companies who are not selling solutions, they're ultimately just selling vaporware.
AI is something that's, we actually know a lot about. Our industry is no stranger to it.
So far, almost all of us experience the beauty of generative AI.
with some of our recent guests and what they had to say about the AI landscape, both from a founder perspective to an investing one. So let's keep talking about it. We've got our VC Spotlight moment with George Matthew, Managing Director of Insight Partners, who too has had a journey as a builder, as a CEO of Kespri. You were over at Alteryx as well, really helping that business go public. And now you're on the finding the new bets side of the equation. And George, what do you make of the hype around AI? Is it hype? Is it reality? How are you seeing the wheat from the chaff at the moment?
Yeah, Caroline, I'm glad you asked that question. When you think about what's going on in AI right now, it's very clear that there is a fair amount of hype today. But when we look at this down the line 10 years from now, we'll realize that absolutely incredible things are happening right now as we speak in terms of building this next generation of software. And this is where Insight has been focused for almost 26 years in terms of really helping guide many of the great founders and executives in building great software companies.
Do the guidance for a moment, because yes, you're there with your AI, your ML headset on, and I'm sure you're thinking about companies that have that as their bones to invest in. But when I think of Insight, I'm also thinking of the ed tech companies you have, the e-commerce companies that you have, the companies that are being disrupted enormously by artificial intelligence, particularly generative. How much are you having to guide those companies to become AI native in many ways?
In my view, every company has an opportunity to become an AI company. And if you think about the opportunity that exists, particularly within the Insight portfolio, many of those companies have incredible amounts of private data. Well, what is that opportunity when you look at the market for really building AI companies at scale in the future? It turns out it's that private data. And so when we work with many of our portfolio companies, we really help them understand the use of that data to be able to build analytical models, to be able to build generative models at scale, and be able to support the scale of their existing business being an AI-driven one.
It really is going back to that Cathy Wood conversation we had several months ago, Ed, again, about proprietary data and how important it is.
Yeah, I think the thing for me, George, is we had Vinod Khosla on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he made this claim that 90% of the companies that you guys are putting money into as an industry, they're not going to make it. So I wonder what the strategy then is, whether you have to have a much broader portfolio of companies now just to make sure that in a crowded field you find the kind of shining star.
I think when you look at this market today, there are many companies that are going to struggle in their transition to really deliver AI solutions at scale. We at Insight really focus on the businesses that really understand a few things really well. One is the ability to have that private data available to them to be able to build their AI products. Two is to be able to look at user experiences. Three is to be able to have a great workflow that fits into the rest of the way that that software works inside their specific industry. When you find the combination of those 3 or 4 things, you have a very interesting, compelling business. For example, if you look at where Jasper is today as a business, they were able to really build a mech suit for content marketers to be able to drive the scale of which they are able to produce content at a speed that's 10x greater than anything you've seen before. And so that's a great example of a business that can take the combination of the things that I just mentioned and really build an AI-driven business at scale.
George, where does Insight sit on the debate around regulation and guardrails?
At Insight, we're really looking at how the changing regulation is continuing to evolve. We definitely believe that there's a need to positively regulate the industry, particularly as there's tremendous changes that are occurring at a both societal and a corporate level. We at Insight really focus on really helping our founders just achieve the scale in their businesses, and as they think through the opportunities, particularly from an AI standpoint, how can they build very competitive moats over time to be able to scale their businesses accordingly.
And moats that are international in many ways. I'm interested in, when you look at your previous successes, Chegg, interestingly, an education tech company that's now having to grapple with AI disrupting its business model. Alibaba, a Chinese-based company, and actually Vinod Khosla was saying he's more worried at the moment about China growing AI than he is really about whether or not a lot of the ones growing here are wheat or chaff. How do you think about these two ecosystems evolving, where the US can, quote unquote, win the race?
I think we're at a moment here where there is a tremendous advantage for US-based companies. And why is that? Because if you think about what comes out of a AI or generative model, it's the ability to fuel what we think of as reinforcement learning. And that feedback loop from a reinforcement learning standpoint, whether it be machines, humans, or humans and machines driving it together, really improve models over time. When you look at certain totalitarian regimes, it turns out that feedback loop isn't as significant as when you see the impact of really building a business inside a Western democracy. So in our view, we see a slight advantage right now for companies that are building their corporations in the context of a Western democracy, where you can see a lot of that reinforcement learning really be impacting the positive reinforcement of building models at scale.
George Matthew, Managing Director of Insight Partners out there in New York, thank you very much for your time. Now, coming up, Vice filing for bankruptcy protection and striking a deal to sell itself to creditors. More details about the future of digital media coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
Time now for Talking Tech. First up, French President Emmanuel Macron. He's pitching France as a hub for EVs to none other than Tesla's Elon Musk. Macron is also expected to meet other executives from companies including Pfizer and, get this, Disney's Bob Iger as part of a larger mission to bring foreign investment to the country. Some 200 global business leaders are gathering in Versailles for the event. Let's take a look at shares of Rakuten as they've been plunging the most in, 3 years after a report from Reuters said that it's in the final stages of talks to raise more money, basically $2 billion through an offering of new shares. More supply means downward pressure. The Japanese e-commerce firm has sought to shore up its capital depleted by its struggling mobile unit. And plus, let's have a look at a slip up with AI as ChatGPT mistook Japan's digital transformation minister for its prime minister. In an interview earlier on Bloomberg, Kono Taro recalled how he asked the platform to identify him and it came back with the wrong answer. Kono has been a stark advocate of generative AI, but warned to err on the side of caution when using it, Ed.
That's a good one. Vice, the once darling of digital media, notable for its Emmy-winning programs and reporting, is filing for bankruptcy protection in New York. Bloomberg News media reporter Jerry Smith has the details from New York City. Jerry, what I don't get about Vice is where it went wrong for this company. Is it a video problem? Is it a print problem?
Yeah, I mean, this is really just the bigger story of digital media right now. There's real questions of whether venture capital funding was the right model for the news business. News is not as profitable as other types of digital media. A lot of digital media companies, including Vice, really stake their futures on Facebook and trying to drive traffic through social media. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is that the big tech companies are actually the ones getting the bulk of the advertising dollars, not the digital publishers. So there's a variety of challenges, and Vice really was seen as a real rocket ship. If you think about 6 years ago, this was a company that was valued at $5.7 billion. And now in these bankruptcy filings, we're seeing that its creditors have offered to buy the company for about $225 million, including liabilities. Wow. So it's really a stunning fall from grace for Vice.
Obviously, they want to reorganize. They want to remain a going concern. And actually, what's amazing to me through your reporting is it's not just Vice Media, the one that we know, but it's also for Refinery 29. There's other areas. Ultimately, this is an industry-wide problem. BuzzFeed, whatever, Insider. Is there more pain to come?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been, what we've seen with the recession or the fears of a recession. You've seen a lot of advertisers pull back their spending. And so a lot of these digital media companies that were already having a hard time turning a profit are now seeing that advertising revenue decline. So yeah, this is really not a problem specific to Vice. This is an industry-wide problem. But Vice also was really a darling for the media industry. They raised money from big media companies like Disney. And now it's been a real reckoning for them.
Yeah. Jerry Smith. Keeping on that beat, which is a little bit of a painful one at the moment, I'm sure. Jerry Smith, we thank him for it. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology, Ed.
Yeah, one day down. Recap, hit the podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg.